Alrighty, we're starting the next stream here. Last time it took me like 15 minutes to get to the point, so hopefully we'll go a little quicker this time. Alright, let's see here. So let me get the announcement out for the stream. And what I think I want to do is maybe actually start by cleaning up the other rosters. Maybe we might not need to do that. Let's see here. Alright, announcing the stream. Here we go. I'm just going to answer a question live on our chat here. So Harold, our battle maps, I'm assuming he's asking, going to be handcrafted. So in Master Command, we are handcrafting all of the battle maps. The other maps in the game are all procedurally generated. Okay. All right. Hey, guys. While people are coming in the stream, I also want to show you this dynamic music system that we have, which is really cool. I think you'll really like this, honestly. Let me go ahead and stream the desktop audio. There we go. So how this will work is we have 3 stems, and stems are like different audio tracks here. And it's not like left ear, right ear. It's like different sets of instruments, right? And you can stack them on top of each other to make the full song, or you can peel them away to isolate instruments. Some games, or I don't know, movies, or whenever stems are used, you'll just isolate it instrument by instrument. So if you just want drums, you could do that. But in this case, we just have 3 stems, okay? And we didn't go by instrument necessarily. We just made them sound more intense the more you stack them up. Stack them on each other, rather. And they're all in sync, right? So if I line all 3 tracks up, they'll all play a cohesive song, but you can fade them in and out seamlessly, and you won't even be able to tell. The point of doing this, though, is when the player is in their camp, like managing their troops, moving regiments around, it's just going to play one solo isolated stem. And how that sounds is like this. So it's very calm, right? If the entire game during the campaign mode it played this, you would think, well, the whole thing's a bit boring. It's a bit too calm the whole time. What if an enemy is chasing me? So when the player then, for example, let's delete this part here. If the player leaves their camp, instead of completely switching the song, which sound jarring, right? If you were to have a dedicated camp screen song, a dedicated campaign song, a dedicated enemies chasing you song, the songs would be constantly switching between each other as you're clicking between screens. So instead, those 3 circumstances are built into one song. So you'll notice, let's say I'm on the camp right now. And then I move on to the map screen, which happens right around here. Okay, so notice it picks up a little bit. And then, let's say an enemy starts to chase me. So you can hear the drums kicking up now. And then, if you escape the enemy and you go back to your camp, isn't that cool? Yeah, it's nice. Anyways, it sounds kind of rural and folk. I could have gone... It sounds a little medieval almost, but I kind of like that feeling. If your mind is thinking, oh, it's like a medieval adventure or out in the countryside in the rural Europe. That's kind of what it is, right? We actually had the... we actually had a different theme, or a different sound for the game using this, which sounded very royal and like 1800s and bombastic, but you're not in a court, a medieval court. You're not with the king, right? Like you're in the countryside with the peasants and the folk and going to local villages and recruiting troops. So I think this sound fits better, almost like bridging like the older like levying style medieval sort of campaigning, mixing that with the 1700s vibe. I don't know. I thought it was just a cool way that those two things were bridged. So I like the sound for it. Anyways, we'll move on. let's check out our French units here. So what we'll do is we'll open up... what did I want to do? Last time I had this big pattern that I placed over our... let's see here. Upgrade tree. I had a big red pattern for the French. Or sorry, for the British. So I think it'd be fun to do the same thing. Is there not upgrade tree? Well, you know what I'll do is I'll just grab this nice pattern here. Oh, it's right there. There's France. Oh, gosh. These patterns don't look very good. Okay. I'll grab this one. That one looks nice. There we are. Okay. So what we'll do is we're going to start... let's see how I did it last time. And by the way, I may, at the end of the stream, if we have time, I may go ahead and fix the British roster, because I did change my mind on something. There we go. Okay, so the first thing that we probably want to do is pull up our Google Sheet that has a unit list that we can at least build off of. And the other thing that we want to do is make sure that we hit a certain amount of units. So let's grab everything we have to play with. In fact, let's hide the special units for now. So I'm going to hide the special ones. And we're just going to go with the standard units. And France is going to be an interesting one because they have lots of recruits from all around the continent. And they've got French and Swiss and German and Irish. So I'm curious how we'll want to do this. And I know the least about the French army. So we may need to do a little research or just lay out like a basic plan. And then we can build it out from there and make edits later on. I think that's totally fine too. Just like the British. I made a plan with the British and then ended up changing it later. And what I ended up doing is actually consolidating the Hanoverian tree with the ducal tree, which I know it seemed cool. It is cool that you would have 3 separate trees as the British, but I found that there was a lot of redundancy. For example, we had a bunch of Hanoverian artillery, plus ducal artillery, plus British artillery. So the British had 6 artillery units, all of which were going to have the same stats, just because we had 3 trees. There's also other areas too, like the provincial cavalry, provincial cavalry, provincial cavalry. It's a lot of redundancy. So if we merge the Hanoverians and the ducal tree, we can get rid of all of these and this, and we don't need another recruit type. We can actually just weave all this in, and we cut a lot of the fat, and we just have 1 tree. So I think that's kind of the way. And by the way, coincidentally, if we do that, if we cut all this, it just so happens that the British tree then lines up to have the exact amount of units as the Austrians, the Russians, and the Prussians. If we don't do this, then the British weirdly get an extra like 4 or 5 units compared to any other roster in the game. So it's honestly, it makes it cleaner in game. It's less for me to balance and less for me to make uniforms for. And it just brings all the factions in line for consistency. Speaking of consistency, I'm going to find the guide that shows us how many units we want to go for each roster. And I'm almost a little worried that the French are actually not going to have enough units, weirdly enough. Here's an example of all of the different rosters. This is Prussian, Austrian, Russian, British. Notice how the British are so far ahead of the line because of that non-consolidated tree. The Prussians are actually a little short on theirs, so I'm adding 3 units to their roster. I'm going to be adding Freikorps cavalry, Freikorps artillery, rather. I'm going to be adding Landmiliz, which are going to be like a special militia unit. And then I'm going to be adding Freikorps Grenadiers, which are currently not in it. So the Freikorps are getting a nice expansion to them. And the Prussians are going to be unique in that they will have an intermediate, sort of an intermediate unit they can go to from the recruits. Instead of going from recruit to musketeer, they would go recruit to militia, which they can do for cheaper or something like that. I think that would be cool. And this way they're going to be fully equal to all the other rosters. Anyways, this is the kind of the size that we want to go for, which is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So our target is about 24 units. So I'll also write on here, we want to go for about 24. Okay. So the first thing we'll start with are the, and again, I know the least about the French, so let's hope we can get through this nicely. Okay, so we're going to start with French recruits, our standard unit here. And I wonder if there's anything unique we could do. I wonder if instead of going French recruit, so every time you do a recruit basically means a new tree. Think of it like that, right? So British recruit is for this tree. Hanoverian recruit is for that tree. Ducal recruit is for that tree. A recruit starts a tree, right? I think our issue is this suggested roster by our researcher. Look how many recruits we have. So we'd have to have 5 different trees, and then each of them just get a Fusilier. And then they kind of end there. So it'd be like a 2-unit tree each, right? That doesn't sound quite right. So what I'm thinking maybe is we have two ways we could do it. We could either go French recruit, and they could get one massive tree that's like sprawling maybe, and it goes into like all the different sub-nationalities that a French recruit might be from. They could be Irish Fusiliers, Swiss, and so on. Another idea would be to do French recruits, and these are like the French nationals, and then do foreign recruits, which is how I did the Austrian tree. In fact, I'll just bring that up now as an example. Notice they get the foreign recruit, and the foreign recruit goes into all the kinds of like Dutch and Hungarian and Croatian units that they might have, whereas the German recruits are all the homeland kind of troops. So I think we could either go either way with that. Do you guys have any preference on the kind of tree that we go for there? John says you could do it how you did it with the Austrians. Yeah, that's what I was thinking at first. French recruits and foreign recruits seems good, says Marquis de Lafayette. Gaslight says there were 10 battalions between the Swiss and French guards and the Swiss Grenadiers and the Palace Guards. Interesting. By the way, if there's 10 battalions of anything, that means it could justify its own unit type. Whereas if a country only had 1 to 2 battalions of a certain unit, that counts as an elite unit, I would say. So an example would be the Coldstream Guards. The Coldstream Guards, I think, has like 1 or 2 battalions. So that's its own elite, distinct unit. It's not a type of unit that you could recruit 15 Coldstream Guards from, for example. So if what you're saying is true, Gaslight, about Swiss and French Guards, then this could just be a general unit type as well, which could be cool if Swiss Guards could be something that you could just upgrade your Swiss recruits into for a really hefty price. I think that would be cool. Unless we want to make Swiss Guards just an elite, where you can get, it's a one and done. You only get one of them. The non-French nationals were part of the regular French army. I do think that would be interesting for the sake of variety, because the British and the Austrians have identical trees right now. They're completely identical. I think it could be interesting if the French had just one big tree. If we gave the French a giant tree, though, they would have ultimate flexibility. Like, you'd be able to buy a recruit and turn him into anything you wanted to. Which is why for Prussia, I made them kind of special by saying, hey, if you take the Cantonist, you can take a Cantonist and turn him into pretty much anything besides the Freikorps. And with the Russians, I said the opposite. The Russians, I said, hey, you're so disorganized, campaigning so far from your country, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different trees that are all completely separated. So you're harder to organize your army. You're lucky if you find a troop that you need. You just get take what you can get. So I like to form the trees with like a theme in mind. Now, again, it's a shame because the British were quite kind of original by having 3 medium-sized trees. Now, if we consolidate the Hanoverians and the Ducal, they're pretty much just the Austrians, right? Like 2 medium trees and then 2 medium trees. So, I mean, it is what it is, but I don't want to force distinctions if those distinctions aren't there. And I also don't want the British to be the odd one out with all these extra bloated units just because I wanted to force in an additional tree. It just, every extra unit you add, it just hurts balancing too. It just makes it harder to balance, like making each unit distinct. Anyways, I'll read what you guys are saying now as well. Let's see here. 1 big tree would be very unique. Yeah, I do think 1 huge tree could be cool. Vielgard, though, says, why not separate it into 3? French levy recruits, continental recruits for the Swiss and Germans, and then a small tree for the Irish. That could be cool, but are the Irish special enough to warrant their own dedicated tree? If the Irish made up a huge amount of French recruits, then it could. But I would at least want to get more mileage out of... I think each tree needs a lot more justification. So, for example, the Prussians, I could justify giving them a tree because the Freikorps had their own units, their own infantry, their own Jaegers, their own Hussars. I'm going to be adding Grenadiers to it, so the Freikorps tree is definitely justified. But if you had one tree that just said Irish recruit, Irish Fusilier, and that's it, that's not a justified tree in my opinion. What theme would the French be? Was there anything unique about them in the time period? I think for me, from what I know about the French is they had a massive army. They could raise huge numbers, but they were just very disorganized, and the officer corps was not very good. But they could raise the biggest army. And so I think something that could be cool is if they had one mega tree and all of their upgrades maybe were also super cheap. So they could just build up any army they want super, super quickly. But their units could just have worse base stats. Or maybe another way to look at that is they could... How about this? The French are known for having a huge army, right? They can raise and muster an army larger than any other country is capable of. They have the infrastructure to do so. And so the French don't suffer with choosing their recruits. They can build any army they want. So they have a huge tree, right? But the upgrade costs, the veterancy costs, as they go down the tree are higher than any other country. So they can get their huge swarm of recruits, but to try to professionalize those men, you can't have your cake and eat it too, to use a French expression there. Or let them have cake is more the French expression, but either way, it has to do with cake. The idea would be, yeah, the French can raise this massive army of recruits of any nationalities they want to, but actually trying to professionalize that army and get them organized and upgrade them with veterancy costs, it's very expensive to move down the tree to the higher tier. Whereas with other countries, you might be juggling multiple trees, but once you actually start on the tree, it only costs 1 to grab a Fusilier, and maybe 2 to get them drilled. So maybe that is kind of my idea for what we could do with the French. If the French are a quantity, maybe have one big tree with a larger experience requirement. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what I was just saying. We're on the same page there. Do you guys agree with that idea? This also allows you to let the soldiers to be good. What German states do the French have? I don't think they had their own French states, although they had a presence in Alsace, Lorraine. But they just recruited troops from those areas. Okay, cool. So here's what we'll do then. We're going to make one mega tree, which nobody has yet. Nobody has a gigantic, all-encompassing tree. So I think that'll actually be quite fun to do. So you'll have French recruits, which is your... Is there a better name? Because French implies that they are French nationals. Is there maybe a fancy word we could use to imply that these guys can turn into the Irish, Swiss, Italians, any of them? Maybe like imperial recruits or like something relating to the French Empire, or they weren't an empire yet. They were they were a kingdom, but I don't know what would be a good name. Royal recruits. I really like that. What is the saying people keep using for royalist France? Provincial recruits is also a great one. Royal levies, I really like that too. Royal recruits. I like that a lot because the French are always known, the French kingdom. What's their saying, their motto? I see it all the time, like long live France, or like long live the... If you ever look up French 1700s marches, everybody... let's see, French marching music. Provincial recruit are also a true unit at the time. Do you guys prefer... Oh, Bourbon recruit is also kind of cool too. Vive le Roi, I see that all the time. So they're always known... I feel like they're always known for like the monarchy and long live the king, and the French kingdom is large. So what do you guys think between base recruit name? We could have the Bourbon recruit, the provincial recruit, or the royal recruit. What are you guys thinking between calling the French recruits? And while you vote, I will come up with the other units then. I'm so excited to play the French. They seem really interesting too, because you have all these different types of Fusiliers with the Irish, the German, the Swiss. I think that'll be so fun to like build any kind of army you want to, or like theme each division around a group of different Fusiliers. Also, there will probably be a Reichsarmee faction, sub-faction that is, German Fusiliers, Irish, Swiss Fusiliers. So you could probably get some Reichsarmy troops too. Italian Fusiliers. Look at all the different types. And it's fine if we have all these different types because the French don't get a bunch of other trees. They get one big tree. So there's not going to be a bunch of bloat with like generic recruit units. You know how every time I do a new tree, right, you have to have surf recruit, volunteer recruit, artillery recruit. Well, that takes up space in the units roster to have all these base units. So if we're consolidating all this into one tree, we have more flexibility within the one tree that exists to create these musketeer units or fusiliers. So you guys are leaning on Royal Recruit and Bourbon. So we're going to do another vote after this and then to put up Bourbon versus Royal and then have you do one more vote because it's a three-way vote. So technically speaking, if the Royal and Bourbon voters united, they would beat Provincial, or I don't know. You could say the same thing about Bourbon Provincial beating Royal and so on. So I'd like to just narrow it down to two. So the base recruit name, 2 out of 2. What's the final poll? We're going to do the Royal Recruit versus the Bourbon Recruit. And now you guys can do the final pick. Says definitely make all the units, French units, weaker due to their overall size. This would give the French an advantage and disadvantage battles. More regiments, but they're weaker. Is that true? Because I was reading, Alex Burns was telling me the French regiments, they would pile up battalions they would consolidate so many of them and have really large units that they would, I think the individual battalions were smaller, but they'd consolidate them into larger units and they would have like 3,000 men blocks of troops that they would be playing with. So I was thinking of making them the largest size, but I would have to do more research on it. I don't know for myself. I'm just taking his word for it. Okay, so French recruit. We don't need any of these recruits now. We have the German, Irish, Swiss, and Italian Fusiliers. Now we can do... The French tree is going to look so funny. French Fusiliers. So now they don't have very much. We need to make up 24 units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So we're gonna have plenty of room to add more. So you guys are saying Royal Recruits. Okay. There. Infantry regiments of the French army consisted of several battalions. Their battalions were really small by comparison, but you're right, they formed larger ad hoc. That's what I was thinking, Gaslight. That's what I was thinking. And it just makes more sense because the French are going to be kind of the quantity faction. Add a designated skirmisher unit. Yeah, I think we're going to have more room to play around, guys, because we consolidated so many recruits that we're going to have more room to play with. Anybody who knows anything about French artillery, should we do 2 types of reserve artillery? Should we do 2 types of artillery for different nationals, or should we just do one dedicated standardized type of artillery? I would imagine standardized, because we don't need like German artillery or something like that. We just do reserve artillery and field artillery. And apparently, yeah, I wouldn't do heavy because the heavy artillery is going to be through the caliber of the barrel, which the player can set as an item. So we don't need heavy artillery. The unit just reflects the training, right? So reserve is like the weaker artillery batteries who just have less experience. That's kind of how you set this up. Do you want to do, should we do a third, if the French artillery was good, should we give them a 3rd special artillery unit? I did do that for a couple other factions. Like the Prussians go into field artillery, and they have horse artillery as an option. The Russians get artillerist recruits all the way up to field artillery. I think the Austrians get guard artillery. Do you think the French should get guard artillery? Again, this is just, it's not a specific unit. They didn't raise up artillery of the guard or something, to my knowledge. It's just the experience level of, like, if they had very good artillery crewmen, they could have a guard artillery unit, which would be, like, the top level of professionalism for the most renowned artillery units in their army. Grenadier. Did they have Grenadier artillery? Was that a thing? Yeah, let me know if either horse artillery or grenadier artillery or guard artillery, if either of those would work for another, because we have the space in the French roster to add more. Guard would be kind of my default, or like my de facto, if these other things didn't exist in the French army. Hold on, you said Russia has good artillery. Where are their strengths if they don't have guard artillery? The Russians, I don't think, are known for having like the most experienced crew members or like the most efficient gunners. To my knowledge, they just had very powerful guns. So what I was going to do is just make their batteries larger, but you don't get guard artillery. So you could just muster an insane amount of firepower, but it's less accurate than the French and Austrians potentially. So that is kind of what I was thinking for the Russians. All right, chasseurs, I would imagine, would be under the French side of things. So you can go down the French Fusiliers into chasseurs. I'm going to have to clean up how all of this is laid out later, but should it be a chasseurs à pied? I imagine, because we want to note that they're on foot, not on cheval. I don't think the French actually had guard artillery. If they did, they would be attached to a battalion of support guns. Yeah, Gaslight, the guard artillery would be like reserve artillery. It would be more of a reflection of the training of the crew, not the actual unit. As in, like, for example, the British didn't have a unit called British Recruit sent into the 7 Years' War, but it's just used as a way to reflect inexperience of new troops on the battlefield, who will then be reformed and professionalized into more established musketeers, which again is not necessarily a reflection of historical accuracy. It's just more of a reflection of the quality and training of the troops. In the same way, royal recruits is not a thing necessarily. So guard artillery wouldn't really be a thing. It would just be, these guys are a little more reformed and they've had their practice and training. So that would kind of be the idea behind it if we did it. Yeah, Will, this is what I'm thinking too. Prussia was the unique one with horse artillery. I believe that is the case too, from my research. If we have recruits, could we have veteran artillery as the final unit? Well, veterancy is a mechanic in the game, so I didn't want to use that word. I already have veterancy as like an actual experience that you can earn within the unit. So let's put a pause on the artillery for now. With chasseurs, would we have any other nationality type of chasseurs for any of the other units? For now, I'm just going to put it under the French Fusiliers, but you guys let me know if anybody knows. Maybe on Kronoskov there would be an answer on that. So I have these chasseurs. And then the voluntaries. Who are these guys? They sound Roman. Okay, let's see who they are. So these are garrison units, apparently. Service during the war. Let's see. The chasseur épée is more of a 19th century. Okay, I'll just go chasseur then. I assume the épée was added as a distinction when Napoleon was raising a cheval chasseur units, and at this time I'm assuming they didn't have a cheval chasseurs, so you would just call them chasseurs. If that's the case, I'll just leave them as is. And operated in Germany within the French army. Okay, that's good. During the invasion there. Okay, so they did actually participate in the correct area here. These are the... What does this mean? What does that mean in English? Foreign volunteers. Okay, interesting. And who were these foreign volunteers? They're light infantry, or that's at least the suggestion by the researcher. And which nationality are these foreign volunteers mainly from? Do we know that? Because if so, we can put them under the nationality that we think fits best for them. Or we can put them under multiple different German. Oh, perfect. So watch this. We'll do volunteers. Look, they can go under the German Fusiliers like that. And then the chasseurs are under here. You said Germany or Scotland. Should I do one idea, by the way? I could even do this. Check this out. I could do this. So if you go Irish Fusiliers, they can turn to voluntaries. Or you can do German Fusiliers and they go here too. Why not make it a united choice? Yeah, I could. In fact, it'd just be a little bit weird if I had 4 connection points. So could we just do 2 of the most prominent? I would do 2 of the most prominent. According to Kronoskov, chasseurs à pied and chasseurs à cheval both existed. In my opinion, difference is only needed if you make chasseurs à cheval too. Okay, we'll consider that. So I'll put chasseur à cheval question mark up here. So we'll come back to that. Voluntaries, go Irish and German. That's what I'm thinking. We'll do a united Irish and German there. And then we could do Swiss and Italian, could have chasseurs. Is it... Okay, how about this? You guys might hate me for this because this is going to sound so inaccurate. If we want to give them a light infantry unit, what if we called them like... Oh, God, you guys are going to hate this. We'll find a better term for it. But just to denote where they're coming from, the commonality between Italians and Swiss serving the French army could be Alpine. So they could have the Alpine chasseurs, and then the voluntaries could come from the Irish and the Germans. And this way they could have their own light infantry units or something like that. It doesn't have to be the word Alpine, but like there could be one uniting factor, some word that unites these two kind of groups. So I'll leave that up in the air. You guys can figure something out. If we want that connection point. Okay, let's jump over from the French Fusiliers. We have the Volunteers. I put them in. We have the Grenadiers de France and the Grenadiers Royaux. So what is the difference between both of these heavy infantry units? Let's see. Gosh, there's so much here. There's a lot we can play with, honestly. There's a lot we can play with. So I might take my time on this. We might be here for a little while. Let's jump over to those heavy infantry units and see how we want to put them in. In fact, let's look up what he has here as the... Anybody who speaks French, can you tell me what the difference between... Is it just Royal Grenadiers and Grenadiers of France? I'm assuming that's what it is. In line infantry regiments, excluding guards, the Grenadiers de France and Swiss regiments. Colors carried by 2. Okay, that's fine. Grenadiers de Cheval. That's cool. There's only one of those units, though. Grenadiers de France. This seems like an elite unit. Not a standard unit, right? If there's literally just one unit called Grenadiers de France, I imagine that this is an elite. They're both royal regiments. I'm not really sure if there's much of a difference. One of them may have been the guards. Grenadier of France was a regiment made up of all Grenadier companies in different regiments. Grenadiers de France. Okay. German line regiments, Irish, Italian. What is this? Oh, Liège. That's kind of cool. And Scotland. I think this would be a fun elite unit. I think that should be an elite. These were the suggested elite units. I think that the Scots would be really fun to put in as an elite. We have Swiss too. Militias. This is interesting. Who are these guys? The Grenadiers Royal. Are these militia grenadiers? Or they just named that? I'm not sure who these guys are. And then let me read here. Apparently someone's clarified for us. The King's Grenadiers are the Grenadiers of the King's House, and the French Grenadiers are the Line Grenadiers. Now, the King's Grenadiers, are those guys a unit type, though? Are there, like, several King's Grenadiers and several French Grenadiers? Like, how many of each of these would there be? Because if there's only one of these that existed in the French army, then that should be an elite unit. But if there were, like, 10 of these and, like, 15 of those or something, or more realistically, like 4 and 3 or something like that. Then they could be their own unit types, but I'm actually just not sure what it would be. Yeah, this is interesting about these guys, because we could do a whole Grenadier tree, or a path within the tree, for example. The Grenadier de France was just one regiment. That's what I'm thinking, too, based on what I read. So I think that should be eliminated and turned into an elite like that. Okay. And then Grenadiers Royal will be the progression of the French Fusiliers. We'll just do Royal Grenadiers, I think, for them. Oh, by the way, the French Guards were mediocre for a huge chunk of the 18th century. Gotcha. They bolted after one volley. I don't know who the Grenadiers... It's Grenadiers de France, Griff. I don't know what that is. Oh, are you saying France, as in, like, France? Trying to get me to say it the authentic way. If there's music for French needed, I've got some French music already. This is the French song. If you haven't heard it yet, I'll play it for anybody interested. Let's see here. This one, I think, is this. It's probably my favorite song in the game, honestly. I really like it. It's called Dance de Village. I don't know the origins of it too much, but I do know it was a song during the time. So we do have a suggestion here for France. You need 2 versions: the House of the King Guards and the Line Troops. I don't know what that is. There are 11 Royal Battalions. Gotcha. Okay, we have the Royal Grenadiers. We could do a huge cavalry line now as well. Oh god, their tree is going to be so massive. Alright, let's move these over. Let's knock out the cavalry, because that is the next kind of obvious choice to go for right now. We want to put the cavalry... I usually position them in most trees, kind of like to the right a little bit. Now you can see the French do a disorganization. Yeah, exactly. I usually put them to the right, and then all the infantry can go left, and this way we have artillery and cavalry there. So, so we'll do French. We'll just do provincial cavalry. That's kind of my go-to for like the reserve artillery, or provincial cavalry is kind of my default crappy cav. That's interesting. The House of the King were a collection of all the units directly attached to the king, both in war and at peace. Did they participate? Are these like a separate... is that like a separate army they had that was like a home army or a home guard or something? If that's the case, we probably wouldn't use them. But if they were fielding that army too as like a separate unit or like a separate thing, then we could represent that somehow. Should you have the royal name like the recruits for the artillery, the cavalry? I've thought about that. I'm not sure yet, John. I think we can polish off the names a bit later, though. For example, the cuirassier regiments, the king's musketeers, and the gendarmes were heavy cavalry and belonged to the king's house of war. Okay, if there's anybody who knows about this, if you could just dump as much information as you can, because that could change the way we're doing this, where if the French had their own separate army for the king, that to my impression here that you guys are telling me is that these guys are like fully separated. We could make them their own separate tree. They participated, but it's a distinction in them. You would have like the Swiss Guard, the French Guard, and so on. It's a true combat unit with a safeguard French one. The Garde Francais was pretty big. Oh god, this is tough. At least we got plenty of choices. I was worried we're gonna have too few choices. Sounds cool. A little super rare tree with only the elites. That's what I was thinking, Veal. That's what I was thinking. So you have one mini tree that's like a ton of elites all in there, and then one big bloated recruit tree, basically. It was generality. I'm just using the word provincial as just like a... I did it for every single country. It's kind of just a generic term. So I think I'm going to keep that for now. I could reconsider it later, but for now I'm just going to keep it just for consistency. So we could make the Maison de Roy give them their own tree for that. Okay, so this is the Maison de Roy, and I'm assuming like these are all the units in it. You have the Garde Francais, you have the Garde Swiss, you got all the Gendarmes, cavalry. You've got the Garde du Corps. Okay. So our question here is, should the Maison du Roi be their own subsection of the main French tree? Or if they're their own corps, should they be their own Maison du Roi? Okay, thank you, Merritt. Feel free to correct the pronunciation. I'll try my best, but Maison du Roi. Because what I did do for the Russians, you may have noticed, anybody who's a 7 Years' War buff, just like the Maison du Roi is a separate French corps, look at what I did for the Russians. They get their own dedicated observation corps tree. So if the Russians are getting an observation corps and the Prussians are getting a Freikorps, we could give the French a Maison du Roi corps. Do you guys agree with that? Or do you want to keep the theme of having one massive tree? We'll do a poll for that, actually. Keep as one massive tree or separate Maison du Roi tree. The French recruit branch is going to be way too bloated if the entirety of it is put at the end. I like that, but I'm not sure how to function. Seems cool to me. I think they were an army within the army. They should have a different tree, someone says. Yeah, let's see what everybody thinks. Dun, 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 dun. I like that song a lot. Okay, most people are saying to separate it. I think that's probably the way to go. So, honestly, would it make more sense to call these guys the royal recruits, right? Because they are part of the... What is this called? House of the King, I assume? Or they could be called house recruits. King's house. King's recruits. House recruits. Royal recruits. That could be for the Maison du Roi. Maison du Roi. What's the point of Megatree if not Megatree? I did think that, but I know that if these guys are a separate corps, I think the French still have this feeling of having a Megatree. Look at it, right? But I think they could have one mini elite tree, which could be cool. Household recruits? Veal, I actually don't mind that, though. You said if it's really difficult to push through, it makes sense to make the elites separate. Otherwise, it's borderline impossible to get to. That's not a bad thing. I don't mind if getting really good infantry is difficult for the French and that they have to rely on recruits for a longer part of the game. I think that actually just makes it interesting. What we're going to do is make the Maison du Roi its own tree. And then at the end, we'll do a final poll to see if we want to integrate it into the main tree or not. I think that's kind of what we want to do. It's more... Roi than roi in French. Roi. I'm just going to say Ra now. Now that I'm getting corrected left and right, we're just going to call him Maison du Roi. Maison du Roi. Okay, do you plan to add DLC for the different theaters? I think that could be cool in the future, but it's not something that I want to discuss just yet. With the Hessians and Hanoverians, I mean, need to do that. Yeah, we'll get to them later. So do you guys like... We'll call these the household recruits then. Household recruits. There. And for now, we're going to start making them their own tree. And if we want to integrate them, we can. Another idea, too, is to just take a bunch of these units and make these elites. So the Garde Francais, the Garde Suisse, and the Grenadiers de Cheval, those could all just be elites. And then you don't need a separate tree for these guys. You know, that might make more sense, honestly, because it is cool having, like, household recruits as this own separate elite tree. I do think that's quite cool. But I think the issue is these are one of a kind, right? One of a kind Garde Francais, one of a kind Garde Suisse, one of a kind Grenadier Cheval. So I actually do think, that they should probably just be under the elite troops. I'm kind of changing my mind on this. In fact, we already planned that. Look, Garde Suisse, Garde Francais. We could even put in here Musketeers of the Guard, or the Grenadier Cheval, right? Like, these guys can be their own. And look, Garde du Corps right there is in there as an elite. So all of your royal house troops are elites. I think that's actually how it should be. The Maison de Royal only had 10 regiments, exactly. So we're going to get rid of that and then carry on. The French and Swiss Guard should probably be at the tail end of the recruit. Yeah, I think so. Mason could still exist for stuff like Musketeers of the Guard. Yeah, I think it's fine to do them as elites, and I think we should just keep with the theme. I think we should just keep with the theme of one mega tree for the French, just because it's fun to do that. Okay, so let's carry on. We have Dragoons and Hussars. Let's throw them in. We're going to do... God, the French tree is the hardest one, isn't it? I usually... How do I usually do this? Hussars or Dragoons next to each other, yeah. There we go. So we have Hussars and Dragoons. Let's check if there are any other unit types for the French army. We have the Hussars, Dragoons. Those are like the two main ones. And heavy cavalry, which include a ton of these guys, the royal regiments. So it seems like we'll want just like... In fact, it is already suggested to do all of those for heavy cavalry. So, yeah. Okay, interesting. And who are the Maison du Roi? Who are these guys? Let's see. They are the King's House Cavalry. Aren't they already being represented, though, through the elite units? Just bear with me, guys. I don't know anything about France. This is just... It's a lot of figuring this out. So, if we go to the Maison du Roi... Okay, that is not really a cavalry unit, so that part will get removed. And then we're just going to have these guys. Now, the Gendarme... Okay, yeah, that is its own huge thing. The Royal Cuirassiers. They're only one unit, so they should probably not be there. Well, Royal Regiments. Who are like these guys? Are these guys Cuirassiers? The model illustrated here. Okay, yeah. Are like... Those are Carabiniers. Piedmont. Are these guys Cuirassiers too? I don't know. What are these units? They are called... Regiment was originally raised... Considered a foreign unit. Okay, that's fine. Regiment could count to 2 squadrons. When the French cavalry was reorganized, the regiment increased. What type of regiment is this, though? Service during the war. It's just saying the regiment, the regiment. Who are they? They're just Royal Cavalry, aren't they? Royal Piedmont Cavalry. So they just have, the French just have a bunch of Royal Cavalry. So I'm assuming we'll have like Royal Cavalry. The numbers Maison. What do they mean? Okay, so Royal Cavalry will be those guys. The Gentleman Cuirassiers. The Supreme Gentleman Regiments. Oh, that's interesting. What is up with the French, dude? The French are crazy. The Supreme Gentleman Army. And who are these guys? Now, the gentlemen who are okay, the regiment was formed then. What type of regiment are the? Let's see. Is that troops to? Oh gosh. Should they just be gentleman cavalry? Regiment du Monsieur. And then cuirassiers. It doesn't seem like they had many cuirassiers, did they? That seems pretty rare to have cuirassiers. And we're already going to do cuirassiers as an elite unit. So I'm assuming... Now, he recommended 3 units of cuirassiers. Yeah, everybody's saying the French cavalry was going through a lot of changes. So probably a lot of line cavalry, and I don't know heavy cavalry. Yeah. The Supreme Gentleman Army, or branch, yeah. I'm not going to refer to them as cuirassiers because the organization's such a mess. We're just going to call them Royal or Gentleman Cavalry if we want to represent them. Heavy cavalry. Curiously, heavy cavalry is called light cavalry. Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah, we're going to ignore that too. We're just going to brute force our way through the French tree. We call our heavy cavalry light cavalry. Okay, thank you, France. Thank you for the information. Looks like the Germans have their own, but Royal Allemand is already represented here. So these guys are German. So we don't need to represent them either. Gentleman regiments and Royal regiments. Okay, so Royal Cavalry, Gentleman Cavalry. So we'll get rid of those. The Gendarmerie... I don't know how to say this word. What do these guys specialize in? What I thought they were like a police unit or like a guard of some sort. What do they actually do? We're sent to reinforce the army. They joined the main army. They did winter quarters. Okay, assembling at the end. Now, did they participate in any battles? They did. Are they more of a light cavalry unit? I'm assuming they're more light. And then the other 2 are heavy. That's what I'm assuming. How could they figure all this out back then? Yeah, I know, man. Yeah. Gendarmerie. Yeah, I'm not pronouncing it like that. I'm just going to give my own personal French pronunciation for every unit. Can a gentleman army be one of the French starting armies? Yeah, it should be. These guys are considered heavy cavalry, is that right? Gendarme. Gendarme. I'll call them gendarme for now. Are these guys considered light or heavy? I really don't know. I'll look at what the researcher said. He said heavy, so these guys are heavy. So they have 3 units of heavy cavalry, which is fine. I think the French are known for that. So the Dragoons will progress then, oh my gosh, into, what's better, Royal Cavalry or Gentleman Cavalry? Which one's like better than the other? I'm assuming the Royal regiments are probably better than Gentlemen. Gentlemen sound like they're, let's see here. This is interesting, brothers, sons. God, the French are like almost medieval at this point, aren't they? Will, what are you saying? The gentlemen are higher or lower than the royal? I'm assuming royal is higher because their uniforms look nicer and the name sounds nicer, but that's not really much to go off of. God, look at the flags too. The Sun King. These guys are like full medieval fantasy army right now. I think the gendarme was militia cavalry. Back then, the rich militiamen could afford horses. Yeah. Men of arms. Gosh, this is tough, man. The toughest part is, like, I don't know between these 3 cavalry units which one, how to rank them. Like, what would be seen as the upgrade? Or are they all just different from each other? That's very difficult. Does anybody have any idea here, anywhere to look? I'm personally not sure where to go with this one. They're tough. I could just pause them for now. Right now, we're up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 units out of 24. So we still have more to add. Someone kept mentioning the Swiss. Did they have like a standardized elite unit, or did they only have 1 elite unit in the French army? Swiss line infantry. Was there like 1 Swiss guard, or were there multiple guard regiments for the Swiss? Does anybody know that as well? Gentleman cavalry was from Piedmont. That's a frontier area. Chevalier Royal. I don't speak French, so just ignore me. Chevaliers would definitely be higher ranks than the hillbillies. The Swiss guard. Yeah, there's only 1 Swiss guard, and they're part of the Maçon. Gendarme, I would think they're light cavalry as well, but they're written as being heavy. It's tough. They're not under the heavy cavalry note here. I mean, this sounds crappy, but let's just get a surface level understanding here and see under French influence. Most influential for organization, French rule. Yeah, I'm just trying to see if they were light. Here, let's see, 7 Years' War. Used for shock and recon. I feel like this would be like a heavy light cavalry. That's kind of how I want to classify them. Like I would say they're the heaviest light cavalry in the game. That's kind of how I want to do them. So I think what we should do is put those guys under hussars. Like so. And then we're going to put dragoons. You can choose between the gentleman cavalry and the royal cavalry. Everyone wanted to be cavalry, yeah. Should these be seen as equal to each other, just specializing in 2 different things, or should one be above the other? Can the gentleman upgrade to Supreme Gentleman? Yeah, they should. And I'll also say this. I know from a historical standpoint, we can immediately say, well, Griffin, all Fusiliers fought equally. All cavalry did the exact same. The Royal Cavalry and Gentleman Cavalry, they're identical stats. Dragoons, Dragoon Guards are always identical stats. It's purely a uniform thing. But when you play a video game, like, okay, if you go play first-person shooter and you go, Griffin, an assault rifle is an assault rifle. They all fire bullets. They're all going to kill you. Okay, yeah, but some assault rifles have higher damage. You know what I mean? Like, it's just more fun like that. So there will be cases where we want to gamify and make a unit just feel different than the other. And those differences don't have to be extreme, but they should be distinctive enough that it makes the game interesting. So that's kind of what I'm not creating a simulation of French military organizational structure during the 7 Years' War. I'm just creating a fun game that happens to take place in the 7 Years' War. So that is also just to clarify, for if people want to know my intentions for how we're designing this, that's also important to know. Dragoons were not heavy cavalry. They were hardly regarded as cavalry. I completely disagree with that. Um, Here's the thing: you have light cavalry, line cavalry, and heavy cavalry typically, but it depends on the army. For the sake of simplicity, I just go light cavalry, heavy cavalry. And if you're classifying dragoons, I typically, unless it's a specific case, I typically just put them under the heavy category because they're typically classified as line. And I use the light cavalry distinction for things like hussars, chasseurs de cheval, Cossacks, kind of irregular cavalry. So heavy, it just includes. I did the exact same thing for fire maneuver, and people yelled at me. Heavy just means line or heavy cavalry, and light just means light or irregular cavalry. Unless you want to say, well, Griffin, we're accurately representing the exact military organizational structure of 1756, and therefore in each army we have 3 or 4 different classifications, which all need to be ranked. But I don't want to go into that kind of territory, so I just use these very binary and simple systems because we're creating a video game. We're not creating a historical guide or research paper. You know, that's just not my intention. Anyways, let's move on. Sad medium cavalry, yeah. Gentleman cavalry sounds weird. Yeah, I know, they do sound a little weird. I don't know what other name we could give them. Dragoons are just mounted soldiers. Yeah, it's just... Okay, Tyre, you have 2 choices. You're making a game. Classify dragoons as infantry or classify them as cavalry. That's it. Those are your only choices. You don't get to create new specific army classifications for each and every type of unit. You know what I mean? So, it's just you're working within the confines that you're given, and video games have confines and limitations. So when you go, well, you could technically, I know a little tidbit. You could technically classify them as a mounted infantry organization. You can play with them as mounted infantry, but they would just be part of the cavalry tree because they're riding on a horse. All of them are riding on a horse. But when you purchase a dragoon unit, they're typically going to come with a carbine, and you can use them as mounted infantry. So it's just a loose, organizational term. That's all. And here's the other thing too. As much as we want to argue between specifics, every nation at this time is going to use all different types of naming and classifications. So if you want to get on me about like specific details, or you want to give suggestions about how certain army organizations should be, you got to throw that out. All of that gets thrown out the window the moment you go to a new army. So at this point, we just have to kind of create one size fits all solution, and that's just how it is. Again, it's just these are the kind of compromises that you're gonna have to learn to work with game design. You're not gonna be able to represent everything perfectly everywhere. If we were painting a miniature army and painting each and every regiment and making like our own little hobby table, sure, we can get into those details, but otherwise we can't. Anyways, I'm just rambling now. I know nobody's actually upset about this, but I just wanted to kind of explain the reasoning as to why sometimes those naming structures might feel a little bit inaccurate at times. Now, to go with the gentleman regiments, is there a better... Someone did recommend another name for them. What did somebody say? They said Monsieur Cavalry, but that also sounds a bit weird, doesn't it? Let's open up a bunch of these and see if they actually use the word gentleman. This gentleman's regiment. What is a French gentleman called in French? Sorry, not. Yeah, I don't think we'd want to name it that either. Noble? But no, that's misleading. I was gonna say you could call them noble cavalry. But royal and noble sound too similar, so I feel like gentleman is fine. Let's keep gentleman for now. We can always polish this off later with like these specific names. We just want to come up mainly with the structure here. Yeah. Okay, so let's carry on now. I'm curious about the Italian, Swiss, maybe even the Irish, about their light infantry and if they had any light infantry. So let's go to them and let's also figure that out. I'm also curious about these militias, the Grenadier, these troops here. Like, do we use them at all? So we'll come back to those later. Let's go to the German regiments. Um, did they have any chasseur? The militia were called Grenadiers to boost morale. You know what's really funny about that? That happened in 2 other instances that I can name just off the top of my head. The Prussians made their Fusiliers wear Grenadier hats to boost morale, even though the Fusilier regiments were just like raised on the fly. They weren't even as professional as the Musketeers. The other funny thing about that is that Hitler, in World War II, you may have noticed, the Germans started using at the end of the war Grenadier units. They would call them like Grenadier divisions and Volksgrenadiers. That was to bolster morale. Even though they weren't elite at all, he wanted to evoke the sense of like Frederican infantry, like men of. In fact, the Nazis were the ones that actually popularized the term Frederick the Great because they wanted to kind of up their history a little bit and show how great they were, and then took Frederick's structure of having grenadier units and then weave that into the World War II German army to boost morale. So it is funny how nations do that, how they just like call something different or put them in a special uniform just to make them seem more elite than they actually were. So that's really funny. Okay, let's carry on here. So the thing I'm not sure about is just about the light infantry for other units. Those are militia, troop de marine, trading post. Yeah, that's fine. Those are like French and Indian War. Let's open up some of these. Oh, I did not mean to do that. Let's open up some of these units and see if we can find. How do I open up a new tab? But just by clicking. I don't remember. Okay. No chasseurs. Oh, okay. Okay. So this one I did find on the Castella's infantry, which are Swiss, I believe. Yeah, these are Swiss. They talk about on 13th of December the Grenadiers and the chasseurs of the regiment. So I bet we could do chasseurs from war units. So what if we had the Italians and the Swiss use chasseurs? What would we call them, though? What would Italian and Swiss chasseurs be called? And then the Irish and the Germans can use the voluntaries. I think that would be nice. This way each kind of group gets their own light infantry options. I was going to call them Alpine because the French control would be more near the Alpine region, near Piedmont, and the Swiss are in the Alps. So I was going to call them Alpine chasseurs. And then we could gamify it and just make them like move a little bit better in rough terrain, since the Swiss and Italians definitely would have more success with that than troops not coming from those regions. I'll call them Alpine. I know that seems like it might be inaccurate, but again, it is for a video game, and at the end of the day, they had chasseurs, and they're mostly coming. Swiss and Italians are mostly coming from the Alpine region if they're serving from France, less so from Naples or, from elsewhere. So I think Alpine is fine. Okay, cool. All right, we're making really good progress. Thank you guys for all your support. I appreciate everybody helping out here. It is really nice to have the company when building this out, because you can see how intimidating kind of this is, especially as somebody who doesn't know a lot about the French in this case. I don't mind for now weaving in a guard artillery, because the French are all about. We could go Royal Artillery, because look at the end here: Royal Cavalry, Royal Grenadiers, Royal Artillery. If that's like a naming scheme, we can do that and just dress them up a little bit fancier. Again, it's more of it's kind of a fabrication, but you could also argue it's a bit like alternate history a little bit. Like you have your main field artillery units, and if you want to, you can upgrade them into the Royal Artillery. As the leader of your own army, you lead your army, right? If you wanted to change the organizational structure, you could do that. Will keeps suggesting Grenadier Artillery. Is that really a thing? Ah, they call them chasseurs de montagne, which is mountain, right? Mountain chasseurs. I think alpine sounds cooler. Do you guys prefer mountain chasseurs or alpine? Yeah, I think Royal Artillery is nicer. I haven't heard of Grenadier Artillery. You know. And now let's figure out who the Grenadier Royaux is, or I don't know how this is pronounced. Yeah, Alpine's nicer. I agree. Okay. Sorry. Now let's research who our... We're making good progress. Let's research these guys. So they're a militia unit. And let's just confirm that these guys fought in battles in... Yeah, Crayfield, Minden. So they were there. They wore white. These guys just wore pure white. These almost look like the recruits. They almost... I would honestly say these guys kind of act as the royal recruits. Instead of calling them Royal Grenadiers, we just call them Royal Recruits. I feel like that's what they are. That's what your starter units are, and they just wear basic white uniform. So in my opinion, that's kind of what these guys are. Pretty much the Grenadier Royal. Yeah. So I don't think we need that unit. I would say it's redundant. Now, what's different is the Milice here. That is different. Milice could be its own unit if we wanted to. Let's see who these guys were. Were mobilized during the expedition of the coasts. They were not really in a battle. These guys are like Coast Guards, aren't they? Yeah, they didn't really do much. I don't see much info on them. Okay, so we'll skip them. All right, let's see where we're at right now then with this kind of tree. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So we're at 19 out of 24 units. So we have 5 more we can add. Feels weird seeing the term bourgeoisie and not in reference to the Soviets, yeah. We can add 5 more. I'm just not sure where we want to flex out. I would say, you know what we could do is probably give Grenadier units to the foreign unit, the foreign soldiers here. That's probably what we can do. I would also mention the French Fusiliers. We could do... What I usually do is add a drilled unit just for fun. So notice... oh, did I forget to do that? For the... I've drilled Fusiliers, drilled Musketeers... Drilled Musketeers. Did I forget to do that for the British? I kind of have to go back to the British at some point to work on that again. Italian and Swiss should also be able to become voluntaries. I would say for gamification purposes, my issue with that is look what would happen if they would become voluntaries. You'd have these lines connected like this, like 4 units flowing into one. Whereas if we did it like this, you could do that, which to me feels a bit nicer. What I'll also do just to make sure we're doing the right thing is check the voluntaries here. And let's open up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're just going to open up a whole ton of them and see where they're usually from. Okay. Let's see. Flanders. I'm not going to fully look through this, but Flanders, this one I can't tell. Is there a way I can learn the region a bit quicker? I assume this one's Flanders as well. That's also Flanders. Dauphine is where? In... France, on the border. So like almost like Italian. A lot of them are like Flemish. German. Fusiliers of the Mountains. Yeah, that's tough. Um, Drilled Fusiliers for the Irish makes sense. Yeah, I'm not sure. For the Drilled Fusilier, you could use the term Petite Vieux, which is the collection of veteran French infantry at the time. I think I just want to call them drilled, but I would use that uniform. I can use the uniform or like references of the Petite Vieux, however you pronounce that. Do we know who had the best infantry under the French army? I typically just do drilled for... I typically do drilled just for like the base units. So like, for example, for the German tree, I just do drilled for their German troops, but not for the Hungarians. And for the British, I would do it for the English troops, but not the others, just because they're like the most standardized unit. Again, it's for gamification purposes, but I think that would work best. And then you can go French Fusiliers into French drilled and then to Royal Grenadiers. Or you can go into Chasseurs on the side like that. There. If you want, you could remove the drilled. No, I think I'm happy with that. Going to the Royal Cavalry and the Gentleman Cavalry, that one I would like to figure out which should be above each other. Let's see here. The upkeep of regiments, Colonel, as well as the maintenance of company, can become unaffordable, explaining the disappearance of the gentleman's regiment and end of financial duty of captains. Okay, interesting. And when did this happen? So the Epic in 7 Years' War, 60 regiments, 50 squadrons. Okay. Colonel General had the regiment. Okay, yep, we know that. The reform of 1761 saw the creation of additional regiments, royal, a bunch of royal ones, and the amalgamation of older regiments. These new units were not provincial regiments, but royal. This reform marked the final outcome of the royal control of the cavalry, a process that started under Louis to reduce the influence of the princes. So here's what I'm thinking. The royal cavalry is like the new reformed cavalry, and the gentlemen were the old ones. So what I would see, and they got replaced, right? So what I would do is I'd put the royal underneath the gentleman, and this way you progress from dragoons, and you could stop at dragoons if you just wanted mounted infantry, or you could say, you know what, I want these guys to turn into kind of my gentleman cavalry and be a bit more elite. And then once the gentleman cavalry are high enough level, you could say, hey, I'm going to do one final reform and then convert some of those regiments into royal cavalry. So that to me seems like the natural progression of the cavalry line. There, and you have Royal Grenadiers, Royal Cavalry, and Royal Artillery all at the end. So you have a huge wide tree, but if you can manage to get all the way to the end, you get this big royal reform right at the end for a lot of units. So I think that, to me, seems like the most logical way to go there, based on that research. I think we are down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. We only need 4 more units. And I would say the most logical thing here is adding Grenadiers to some of these units here. So you can play more into the foreign units. And the key thing is you don't have to. That's exactly right, Merritt. You could keep... There is a benefit of keeping units at a lower level and then getting higher veterancy. So for anybody who doesn't know, how this works is if you had these gentlemen cavalry, and let's say their veterancy was 0, if you grew them to, let's say, veterancy 5, you can spend some of the veterancy and lose it to turn into royal cavalry. And so you temporarily become less effective than you were before, but now your skill ceiling is higher. So let's say your skill ceiling under gentleman cavalry was there, and you got all your veterancy, so you get all the way up here. You would have to spend your veterancy, so now you lose all this, but now your skill ceiling is higher because you're now a new reformed unit. So temporarily, you're actually less effective than you were, but eventually, if you get further along, you're going to become better than you were before. So it's like shifting gears. It's like you go down speed a little bit, but then you've got a higher room to go up. So you can keep them as gentleman cavalry or reform them if you choose to do so. Okay. Can't wait for my Cantonist-only campaign. Yeah, that's true, Merritt. That's technically possible. You could have, like, super elite Cantonist and non-musketeers if you wanted to. The other thing I do want to note for myself when I do reform my trees is that the okay. There we go. Sorry, I just had to write a note about how I want to reintegrate the Fusiliers with land militia. Sorry for the silence there. It's just a lot to organize. Okay, let's carry on here. If you deny the specifics of the Bourbon army now, there will be a lot of criticism. Deny the specifics of the Bourbon army? There will be criticism? I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, honestly, here's the thing, and I already spent 15 minutes telling you this, and then you didn't listen to anything I said. I'm not representing a simulation of the 7 Years' War. So if you want a perfect simulation of every single aspect of the Bourbon army, you're just actively not going to get it in this game. It's just not the type of game. If you want that, I will give you a positive recommendation to play another game. So I'm not trying to deflect you, but if you want a better game for what you're looking for, I think you're going to look for this game, and you're going to be happier with this, because this is not a very pretty looking game, but it's a better simulation. This is going to spend every moment bogged down in the simulation of trying to represent each and every little aspect of all the different armies. If you want that type of game, I think you would actually really enjoy this. I'm just not going to represent that type of game, so it's just not going to be what you're getting here, unfortunately. And I already talked about this, so I don't need to repeat myself again about why we're not doing that. What I do want to figure out is where to place Grenadiers, and I'm thinking maybe of having a Grenadier. I could do Grenadiers for each of these. That would add 4 units, actually. Let me just experiment with this and just see if I want to go for this. Because check this out. We could knock out the next 4 units by doing Grenadier units for all of those things. And I know, again, well, Grenadiers are a company, not a battalion-sized unit. But again, this is just gamification. So if you don't want to play with Grenadier battalions, you don't have to. You can just ignore that part of the game if you don't want to use them. But let me just see if this would actually look nice on the tree. We need a wider tree. It's really tall, but it's not wide enough. So what we're going to do is take the image, and we're going to adjust our canvas size and actually take the width and go like that and just expand it outward. Okay, I think that helped us a bit. In fact, we could probably even do this even further. We could take the width and go more like 7,000 and then reduce this to like 2,500. Ah, crap. Okay, yeah. Hold on. Image, canvas size. You know what? How about this? I'll take this here. We're going to take the width and go like 8,000. It was commonplace in many states for Grenadier companies to be temporarily or converging to Grenadier battalions. Yeah, exactly, Merritt. That's what I'm thinking as well. So I think there is some basis in the accuracy of it. And I think that's good enough for me, honestly. Well, they would form ad hoc units. Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. Again, every single army is going to have their own unique way that they're organizing themselves, and also commanders at times are just going to break the rules of military conventions. They're going to form ad hoc units, or they're going to form their own units to whatever needs they, based on the circumstances, they're gonna change their structure to fit the needs that they have. So I'm gonna move this here a little bit. There. Okay. So we've got a little bit more space. We're going to widen this out a little bit more. What about adding colonial units to the French trees? So Scratch, that's a really cool idea, but we're not representing the French and Indian War in this game. We're just going to start with the European theater. So, Veal, you dropped something about Grenadiers. Let me see. Where'd you put it? Under design discussion or suggestions? Okay. They're very rarely grenadier regiments because back then they were companies. Um, yeah, no, I don't want to do it that way. I'd rather make them actual units. Again, it's just like let's make the game less fun because we want to be more strict about the historical accuracy and not have actual grenadier units. Let's just remove grenadiers from the game. You technically could try to make grenadier units have like half of or like a quarter of the units standing there have different uniforms, but that conform to the stats of the base battalion. I don't know, like it's just not within the scope of what we're trying to make. So yeah, okay. Let me see here. I'm trying to. Oh, you know what would be cool? Check this out. You kind of have this space there, and then you have the chasseurs. So you can either go for light infantry or into grenadiers, and we can do the same thing here. So check this out. I'm not talking about my preferences. I'm talking about history enthusiasts. Yeah, I do expect plenty of negative reviews and negative feedback from people who wanted an accurate simulation, like a proper war game of the 7 Years' War. I think that's the one negative thing about renaming the game to Master of Command 7 Years' War is I debate whether I should have just kept it as Prussian Glory because Prussian Glory doesn't mean anything, and so at least I would have more of an excuse to take some creative liberties. But because it's now called 7 Years' War, I think there are going to be people who, and in some cases that criticism might be justified, that they expected a completely accurate one-to-one portrayal of the 7 Years' War because the game is called such. So I think that maybe will end up being a mistake. But in the marketing for the game, I'm certainly not going to present it as like the most definitive historical representation of the 7 Years' War that's ever existed. I don't think that's what we're going for. Yeah, not to be defensive about it, but it's just. Yeah, I think I'm just not able to do that with this game, to create a sort of simulation like that. And I'm trying to find an accurate balance between what's fun and what gets bogged down in simulation territory. All right, so technically I have completed the French tree if we go with this layout here. So take a look. We're going to move this there. I think we have a little more space on the left to move the Royal Recruit. Is this right? So there's a lot of space there that overhangs out. So we're going to move the Royal Recruit over. So I'm just measuring to make sure this is like centered. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to draw the connections and we're going to review. Let's see how big our connections are going to be. Pretty small, right? So we'll go 10. But the other thing I'll say too is that if you wanted to play a 7 Years' War style scenario and you go play Empire Total War, the representation of Irish, German, Swiss, Alpine, chasseurs, gentleman cavalry, none of this exists in those types of games. So I feel like what we're doing already is already more than what most companies do when they try to cover the 1700s. Or, I mean, how many times have you guys played a game where every nation is just reskinned? They just call them line infantry, and they're all just reskinned. Same uniform. They just carry a national flag. There's no actual distinctions between those unit stats. They're just completely recolored. So, you know, I think we're doing at least better than that. And that's all that really matters to me. We might not be doing, like, a full simulation, but I think we're doing better than how other games might be representing those units and nations. Okay, so I'm going to have you guys review in a moment. What about for DLC? Same unique squads. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Okay, let's do this. And that. Good. Irish Fusiliers to Italian Grenadiers. Did I mess something up? I did mess something up, sorry. Germans to Germans, Italians. Sorry. Yeah, I messed that up. Good catch. I just wasn't reading. I was just focusing on the connections. There. Thank you for the correction. Every historical game or movie is an abstraction of the period in any way. Authenticity plus good gameplay is much more... Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking. This game is aiming to be authentic, but we're not claiming to be the most accurate. So that is what I'm going for. Yeah, it is very wide and shallow, the French tree, I notice. So you get a lot of variety, but it's hard to... Besides for like the very royal end parts here, the other ones just don't have as much depth necessarily. Which I think is fine. It kind of represents the kind of disorganization and lack of professionalism in the French army at this point. And the French definitely don't seem like a good starter faction, because I feel like you'd be overwhelmed with the amount of choice here. Whereas if you play Prussia, well, Prussia's a little overwhelming too, but at least with Prussia you go like Musketeer or jump into the Grenadier line or go Cav or Arty. You just kind of pick which branch you want. But with the French, it's not really a branch you're picking. It's like which nationality with all these different nuances are each of them going to have. Okay, I think this is it, guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. That's exactly 24 units, which was our goal, right? How's everyone feel about this? Any thoughts? Oh. Yeah, sorry if I was a little rude to some folks in the chat, but I'm just trying to focus. It's a little difficult to try to get all of these things. It's complicated, and I'm just trying to find the right balance between how complicated and nuanced we want to make this versus how gamified. So, yeah. What are the voluntaries? The volunteers are like skirmishers from foreign countries. I don't know what the word exactly means. It seems like it's just foreign volunteers. I believe in French it just means foreign volunteers. But they're kind of like, I believe that's the case, right? Yeah. They're kind of like irregular light troops from foreign nations. Let's read some of the feedback here. If and when I do my campaigns, I'm just going to satisfy my historical urges by naming the units battalions. Merritt, you can totally do that. Like, we're not only could you rename any unit you want to form the exact military organizational structure that you want to represent, but you can also recolor the flags, recolor the facings of the uniforms to be as accurate as possible. And in addition to that, the divisions that they're part of, you can rename too. So, for example, in the game currently, there's like, oh, sorry. You have a division, and then the division has 4 slots under it where you have regiments that you can fit in, right? So this would be like Div 1, and then Regiment 1, Regiment 2, Regiment 3, right? You have the ability to rename all of it. So you could actually go Brigade 1, for example, if you wanted to go that way, and then do Battalion 1, Regiment 1, and then Battalion 2, Regiment 1, like they're both part of the same regiment, but they're just different battalions. And then do Battalion 1, Regiment 2, and then Battalion 2, Regiment 2. And then you could say, hey, I want Grenadiers here as part of the same regiment but a different battalion. And then I want infantry, and then infantry here, and then Grenadiers. And then I want these guys to be lumped under a brigade. And then I'm going to set my commander, who's my brigade commander. You could completely restructure your army to fit any kind of military organizational structure that feels most authentic or accurate or easy to understand to you. And then you could also recolor the flags to make sure that units of differing battalions of the same regiment both have, let's say, green flags with green facings. And then this one might have purple or blue facings and flags. And then you could change the emblem on them to slightly differ the emblem based on the type of battalion, for example, if you want that to be your organizational scheme. So any kind of organizational scheme you can fully represent in this game. Anything you want to. It's entirely possible. This is not theoretical. It's already implemented and working. So, yeah. Will says, I thought in the other live stream you said you could have different unit upgrades into the same one for hardcoding reasons. you could have different unit upgrades. I'm not sure what you mean by that, Will. Could you rephrase that question? I'm just not sure what you mean. Will you be able to give line infantry carbines to give them swords? I don't believe you can right now. I'm kind of debating what kind of historical accuracy we're going to allow players to break, but I think you can give infantry carbines if you wanted to, because that is technically some light infantry did use carbines, so I think you technically can do that, but you can't give swords as like a primary weapon to infantry. I don't think you can do that right now. What's the primary differences between Irish, Italian, Swiss, German units? Right now, I don't know. I'm going to figure out those stats later on when I ask my researcher. For now, I'm just kind of like planning the tree. But each of them will have like their slightly own different pros and cons. So you can build out different divisions and your own kind of French army based on the specialties of those units and those slight nuances and differences. There's room for people who want to go for the ultra historical to get the extra hit. Yeah, I think so, Mara. I think you can fully represent. The units are completely renamable. It's not like Empire Total War where it says regiment of line, quote, musketeers. It's not that. It's not like if you said, hey, I don't want to be called regiment of line. I want them to be called musketeers. And it just adds quotations. You can fully delete the name and name them anything you want to. So if you actually want to rename your recruits, if you're like, hey, Griffin, I don't like Royal Recruits. That sounds like an inaccurate name. You can rename Royal Recruits to Grenadier Royale, or however you pronounce this. And it will display as that name. Completely. It's not going to be called Royal Recruits and then in quotations Grenadier. You can rename anything to anything you want to represent the style of army and the accuracy that you want to portray within your military. That's totally fine. Yeah, can't give sabers to infantry. I don't think so. I don't. For the next game, if we do like Free Company next, which I don't want to explain what Free Company is, but if we do our next game, then maybe we would allow that. For those who know what Free Company is, you can understand why that would be more appropriate for that game. But for this game, I don't think I want to do that. I think there could be modifiers for weather. Be fun if there are cheat codes. Cheat code names, that's interesting. Yeah, so if you name a unit after a dev, they get different stats. That'd be funny. Scratch Liquid, I do think I want to omit Marines. I just have a thing against them right now because I always think if you add Marines for one country, you have to add Marines for almost every country. And if you're not doing if you don't have any naval combat in the game, I feel like Marines are kind of part of that branch, and I typically tend to go away from that unless I add like a naval DLC. Then we could add Marines for all the units that could be used on ships and on land too. The next thing, we aren't completely done. The next thing we will do is we're going to move this tree up. And, interesting. Okay. Marines are regular infantry made up from sailors who got blockaded. That's interesting. Let me check them. I think we're already full on units, but I could just read about them for a little bit if you'd like. Let's see, the Marines. Even though they belong to the Navy, we also listed them because they were in fact land units with the French infantry. That's interesting. Because there's only like 3 of them, I think these troops were deployed in North America. Yeah. So I think for now, I'm happy with this. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is do the elite units. This is the fun part because we can just this is purely based on aesthetics. So if you guys like an elite unit because it looks cool, that is good enough to include it in the game. It's not purely based on that, but it's just like if a unit looks cool, it's unique, it's got a good history, that's what makes an elite unit as like a bonus recruitable. So the current options include the following units here. We only get to add 10 though. So we have all of our options. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 20. Okay, we have about 22 options. We have to narrow it down to 10. First thing I want to do is I like when there's elite artillery because there rarely is, so I think we should add that. So 5th Battalion Corps Royal Artillery. I think that's cool. Let's get rid of all the other fluff here. Good. Okay. Cool. Keep the Swiss. I agree with keeping the Swiss. We got to have the Swiss Guard. And the Garde Francais is my favorite uniform in the game, so we're definitely keeping them too. Yeah, we want to keep... this is where we want to represent the Maçon du Roi. Okay, so we want to get most of those units in. So I would say like Grenadiers of France, the Garde Francais. Who else was part of it? The Garde du Corps. Probably not Garde du Corps. I don't know. I feel like the Royal Allemand is cool because they're German. The Musketeer of the Guard are really cool. I love their uniforms. Grenadier Cheval, I probably want to keep too. I want the Scottish infantry, so I want to put them in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're already at 8, so we only have room for 2 more. Crucivant says, don't we already have Royal Artillery in the tree? We do, but this is like an elite unit. In the same way that we already have Royal Grenadiers, but we could have Grenadiers de France be an elite unit. They're just like a special kind of like side unit. If we feel like it's too redundant, I could get rid of it. Here are other choices here. If we want to add 2 more. These 3 are heavy cav. These guys are heavy inf. These 3. These guys are line infantry. And these guys are artillery. Okay. The Royal Dupont. Yeah, the Dupont infantry do look really, really cool, don't they? They're in Empire Total War, I'm pretty sure, as well. Should we add the Dupont? Because they're a good line infantry. I do like them. Oh, they're German, aren't they? Are they German? Chronoskoph makes it look like they have really crappy looking uniforms. But I thought they had cooler uniforms. Let me see. Yeah, Dupont looks like this. I guess that's the Grenadier uniform on the right. These guys... This is what it says it looks like in Chronoskoph, but this is what it looks like everywhere else I look. They look like that. So I don't know why they're 2 different versions. I do like them a lot. I think they'd be fun. And they have a good history. They have a good like record. Battle of Rosbach. Obviously not in this war, but they're also in Battle of Minden, which is important, and Vellinghausen too. So I'd be a fan of... the Dupont. Picardy would be cool. So Picardy would be cool because, well, Picardy is like northeastern France. It's not Flemish necessarily. These guys don't really sound that unique to me. Royal Italian does sound pretty cool because it's just a foreign unit, so I do like that. I feel like we already have voluntaries, so we don't need more. Royal Dragoons. We already have a bunch of Royal Cavalry. We don't need more. I feel like the Berkini Hussars or Turpin Hussars could be really cool to represent. Garde du Corps, I don't think we need more of that. We already have tons of heavy cavalry. The Gendarmerie, the Scottish, we already have Scottish infantry, and I feel like the Scots aren't known for cavalry, so we could get rid of that too. Burgonde cavalry, I feel like we don't need more cav. How many choices do we have left? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We only have 1 choice left at this point. Which, by the way, I could always add more through DLC or updates. Imagine even a free DLC that just says, hey, we dropped 2 or 3 more elite units for every country in the game. We can definitely do that. Let me look up. Here's what we're going to do. To decide the last one, let's do it based on the uniform. That's always fun to do. So let's look up the Royal Italian. Oh, it does seem... It seems like for the Italian, though, Italy only has 2 units. So if we're already representing Italy through Fusiliers, we should probably not give them another elite unit, because that would be redundant. Yeah. So Picardy infantry is the first, I think. There's Picardy. We have Buckley, which is... Buckley's Irish, but that is still cool to do. Diesbach is Swiss. Chasseur de Fischer. Turpin Hussars. And Berkini Hussars. So let's see. These are our options. Picardy looks like this. Buckley. Oh, Buckley looks cool. Oh, man, we love Buckley. Buckley's looking cool. Diesbach. Diesbach looks cool too. Really cool maroon uniform. Chasseurs de Fischer. They look pretty cool too. Turpin Hussars are just blue Hussars. And the Burkeni Hussars are just blue and red. I don't know. I'm kind of leaning on the really cool Irish ones, to be honest. Diesbach is really neat too. I honestly, my vote would be either Diesbach or Buckley. The French already have 1, 2, 3 heavy cavalry units, plus a ton of cavalry here. I feel like they don't need more cav. So at this point, I'm mainly between this one and Buckley. Do you guys agree? Or do you disagree? Is there a better one that we could be doing? Technically, we have no elite light infantry, but I don't think the French were really known for light infantry at this time. It's more the Austrians. Irish because we already have a Swiss one, someone says. Well, isn't Diesbach isn't Swiss, is it? Oh, it is Swiss. What, do we already have a Swiss one? We have German, Swiss. Yeah, we do. I would go Buckley. Buckley's really cool. I'm not even doing a vote. I'm going Buckley because they just seem so cool. Because we already have Swiss. So this would be the one Irish. We'd have a Scottish, a German, a Swiss, and an Irish elite unit. So we'd have a really nice variety. I'll do a poll just in case, but in my opinion, I think we go Buckley. So Buckley, Irish, or Diesbach is Swiss. Yeah, doing an Irish harp on the flag generator would be really cool too. Yeah, I think it's pretty firmly Buckley. Diesbach is famous for Rosebach, yeah. Oh, Alex, you're here. Oh, Alex is saying it's gotta be Diesbach. The issue I have, Alex, is we have no Irish elite regiments, but we have but we have Swiss. Well, here's what I would say. Do all the Irish regiments dress like this? If all the Irish regiments look like this, then we don't need a Buckley regiment. If this is like one of a kind, the maroon uniform, then it'd be cool to represent Diesbach. I will say that. So let's look at the Irish regiments. Wait, is there only one Irish regiment? That's not right. Oh, under heavy cavalry. Yeah, I was like, what the hell? There's the Scottish. Irish line, there it is. So there's Buckley, Ruth, Lally, Dillon. Let's see what they all have. Red and green. Red and blue. Red and yellow. Red and green. Yeah. They all have that uniform anyways. And I'm pretty sure they all have Irish harps on the flag. So yeah, we don't need them. Yeah. Okay, we can go Diesbach if Diesbach is original. Now, the last thing I want to look up is for the Swiss. Do they all have maroon uniforms as well? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Diesbach has maroon. Court has red. Sales has red. Maroon. Red. Maroon. So it's actually kind of a mix. So at this point, both uniforms will appear commonly enough. If my researcher is saying Diesbach, though, I kind of want to let him decide on it because he knows the history more than I do. And if there's a historical precedent for it, then I kind of want to put them in. Are you guys cool with that? Or do you guys still really love Buckley? Let me just also look at their combat record because that's also important. Battle of... They were in Vellinghausen, that was it. Okay. And then... Who are these guys? That's Planta. Diesbach is Battle of... These guys are in Bergen and Minden and Wilhelmsthal. Alexander's subverting democracy. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the research... I feel like the guy with the doctorate here probably knows more than we do. Okay, let's do this. And then I will create... Alex, do you want to see a preview? I can DM you. This is a work in progress of what I've got so far. I'm pretty sure this is final for me, but let me know if we should move anything around. There's a couple creative liberties you're going to notice that I took. Like, for example, like Alpine Chasseurs is just a way for the Swiss and the Italians to kind of have a combined Chasseur unit. And I know that some voluntaries could have been Swiss or Italian, but I didn't want to have 4 connection points from Italian, Swiss, Irish, and German, and vice versa. Irish, German, Swiss, and Italian. This looks messy, you know what I mean? So I just thought it would be cleaner to just do it like this. And people can always rename units, right? Like, you could take a Swiss Fusilier, upgrade him into an Alpine Chasseur, then rename him into Voluntaries as a Swiss Voluntary. So you can completely change that if you wanted to. What is cool, Alex, that I think you'll like is we did one mega tree for France to kind of represent that they have this huge army that they can just like form any kind of military they want to, but it's kind of disorganized because it's so wide. So you have a little bit of like military disorganization, but it is it's gigantic, and they're the only tree. They're the only nation in the game to have a tree this wide, just to have one mega tree. So I think it's kind of unique for France to have that. Since they were known for having just like this mega military, you kind of feel that when you see this huge tree. You kind of like get that impression, which I like. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We could have gone the other way and just gave them a lot of tiny trees, but I feel like that wouldn't be very fun to have like a 2-unit Italian tree, a 2-unit Swiss tree, a 2-unit Irish tree. I liked that it was a huge unified tree like this. Okay, so now we'll do... Oops. It's already 3 o'clock. That's no problem. I've been doing some painting. Yesterday I painted up 2 more Civil War regiments. I've got these are my finished ones. I'm painting a little 10mm Confederate army. I only have 5 units up so far. I want to get about 30 regiments. Yesterday I painted the 31st Alabama. So I'm doing 1 base per regiment. So they're gray with like blue facings. And then I've got the 11th Mississippi. And they're cool because they have these like, I forget what those hats are called. Someone in the comments will know what those hats are. But I left the hats kind of black for that and then gave them red facings. And then made sure they had those hats more often. But they're very small. These are 10mm. It is cool because they look different. You can tell the blue theme on one and a red theme on the other. So I really like that. And then I can paint 2 of those regiments per day. So I figure if I paint 3 times a week, I can get my Confederate army up in just a couple months. And then I can move on to, I want to do a 15mm Prussian 7 Years' War army. Do you guys prefer, this is an army, this is not mine, but this is an army with black bases. So you can see the brown and the green and then black rims around them. And then this is my force here that has brown rims. Do you guys prefer the black or brown rims? I think brown looks good in isolation like this, but black probably stands out more on the battlefield, which if you're playing a game with a lot of units might help, but I'm not quite sure. Let me know what you guys think between black and brown bases. So I'm going to paint more today. And I've been basing as I go, but I think that just wastes time. I think it's better to base in bulk when they're all done. Steven, you prefer brown? Which scale is easier for painting? I've painted 28mm, 15mm, 10mm. I would definitively say this. 28mm if you want to go for a diorama with a couple units, or play a skirmish level game where you have like 10 guys fighting, okay? If you want like a big 18th century or 19th century battle, do not do 28mm. I just don't think it works. 10mm is if you are going for massive scale, 200,000 men in a battle, if you want to represent Gettysburg and do a really small scale. So I'm doing 10mm. I would not recommend 10mm for, I mean, you could do this, but this is just my personal opinion. I don't recommend doing 10mm if you want to represent every company in a battalion. It's possible to do, but like I like 10mm because I can do 1 base per regiment, and I can represent literally like half of Gettysburg on a map, or even the whole thing, and actually get a feel for just forming up brigades. I can just take 3 stands, put them together, and I have brigades, and I can play on a brigade level. If you're doing the 1700s, I love 15 millimeter. That's my 1700s, and even World War II. Generally speaking, you can't go wrong with 15, because 15 you get a higher level of detail. You can actually paint the faces, paint details on the guns, paint buttons. 10 millimeter, you just can't do that. I find that 10's just not as fun to paint, and then 28 just takes so long. It's just too large. So I primarily prefer 15 millimeter for most projects, just in general. So when I do the Prussians, I'm probably going to bump up to 15. I'm only doing 10 for the Civil War because I want to go with a big brigade scale, like a ton of brigades. And I feel like 10 just allows me to do that easier. The 5th Royal Artillery, the Garde Suisse, good, the Garde Française, the Grenadiers of France, the Royal Allemande Cavalry, the Mousquetaires de la Garde, Royal Escossaise, Royal Dupont Infantry, the Diesbach Infantry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Who did I miss? Dupont, Diesbach, Grenadier Cheval. I think this is kind of what we're looking at then. I think this is our completed French tree, guys. This was tough. This was tougher than the British one, honestly. There we go. Okay. Grenadiers of France is the only one in English. Yeah, the names will be ironed out later. I think over time we can iron out names. At this point, I just want to get stuff down, because if we sit there and overthink the naming conventions, we're just going to be too slow. The stream is already almost 2 hours, so yeah. For the British, I do want to reform this. I think I'll do all of my tree reforms, though, next month, because we are not... let me just read here. Could be an upgrade French Fusiliers if you know a larger army. Made a mistake. Sellers, but they preferred tasks. They were supposedly in the Americas. Who were in the Americas? One of the elite units I picked? Or are you saying that the Marines were? To my understanding, the Marines that returned infantry, the Marines that fought on land were mainly in North America. The flag templates and generated for the French will be neat. I think so too. I think the only thing that's going to be weird that you guys are not going to like, okay, is that the flag generator is not sophisticated enough to where the Irish emblem, which we could probably throw in as an emblem, is just going to be random. So you might see a French Fusilier with an Irish flag. That's just going to happen. If it happens to your army, you can, of course, change the flag and fix it. But the flags are just random. We can't set in all these specific rules about which emblems to use, which colors to use, which patterns to use, and in which combinations for every single specific unit. It's just outside of the scope. So there's going to be a little bit of historical inaccuracy breaking with that. But yeah, it shouldn't be a big deal. It shouldn't be a huge deal. Yeah, I think I'll do my tree reforms next month, because we're not even going to get these units in the game until October. So probably first week of October, I'm going to reform the trees, consolidate these two, fix the Prussian tree, patch up the Russian tree by consolidating the Ukrainians into the Cossacks, making them into one, getting rid of Ukrainian musketeers because they didn't exist. Finalizing the French tree with the veterancy costs and so on. We'll just do all those reforms at the end. So that is the French. And with that, all major playable nations are now done with their trees, which is really, really cool. I'll fix the Google Sheet later. I don't even think I want to do that now. So I'm pretty happy with that for the time being. But the player can change the pattern. Yes, exactly. The player can change the pattern in the emblem. The only issue is that when you fight the AI, they might have some inaccurate regiments. I think it's fine, though. I mean, like, you might see a unit with a white uniform wearing with an Irish flag, and that's okay. I think that's all right. It's not going to be the most accurate, but if it's your army, you can change it. Yeah, let's get a Vive le Roi for completing the French tree. That was tough. For anybody in the stream who made it this long, if you want to pause and take screenshots of the trees and look at them, this one's the French one. Some of them are subject to change, by the way. A lot of these are going to get reformed. This is the British one. Here's the Russian one, which is yet to be reformed. I think we're going to merge Ukraine and the frontier. Here's the Austrian one. The Austrian one, I think, is going to receive the least amount of changes, if any. And here's the Prussian one. The Prussian one, we're going to get rid of the Freikorps Horse Grenadiers and turn that into an elite unit. Then we're going to add in Freikorps Grenadiers as just a unit that you can recruit. Then we're going to add in Freikorps Artillery as a new unit. And then we're going to add under-cantonist recruits before you can get to Musketeer, Land Miliz, which are going to cost equal as much as doing Fusiliers. So you either go Fusilier or Land Militia. So they're actually going to be equal tier, which means the Fusiliers are going to be demoted a bit in professionalism, which I think is more accurate. Then you can go Fusiliers into Grenadiers or Jaegers, perhaps. I think the Fusiliers might be more connected to the Jaeger line and Frey Infantry. And then maybe the Musketeers are more connected into the Grenadiers. I don't know. That I've yet to decide on. So yeah, that is all the trees for now. Thank you guys for watching, though. I think we're just about done. I appreciate all the help. I would not have been able to formulate the whole tree without your guys' help, so that was much appreciated. I wish I made the other trees on stream, too. That would have been nice, but yeah. Okay, I will see you guys later. Thanks so much for the help. And if you haven't joined... Oh, quickly, if you haven't joined our Discord, I will ask, before everybody says goodbye, there's our Discord. And one last thing. If you haven't wishlisted the game, on Steam, if you go to Steam here, I know it doesn't seem like a big deal. YouTubers will say, oh, subscribe, like and subscribe. It helps the algorithm. I've never asked for people to like or subscribe. Yeah, I have videos with multi-million views. I really don't think asking to subscribe helps that much. It probably helps a little bit, but doesn't help that much. On Steam, Steam is very algorithmically oriented, I guess. And so if you wishlist this game, it actually does help boost the game's visibility. In fact, if you follow it as well, it actually pushes it. A very apparent way that you'll see this is if you type in master, our game does not come up. And it's because all of these games have more wish lists. So genuinely, if you actually wishlist the game, it will improve its search results. Even if you do master of, it still does not come up because all of these games have more wish lists. So we're actually at the bottom of the search right now. So even if somebody wanted to find the game, it's actually hard to at the moment. So the more you wishlist it, the more that you're going to help boost this and increase visibility, which increases the chance of success for the game. My YouTube channel, it doesn't really matter how many subscribers I have. If I just type in Armchair Historian, okay, I'm the first channel. I could have half as many subscribers. Doesn't really matter because the name is the name. But Steam doesn't work like that. Steam is a lot more competitive in that way. Anyways, that's all. Thank you for the support and for wishlisting. I will see you guys later.